Boy, what a hot week that was. The week I filmed this video was the hottest week we had the entire summer. It was easily over 90 degrees while I was doing the work, and my only saving grace was a beautiful tree which gave me great shade in the afternoon to work under. When I originally shot this video, I was thinking of doing it more for just fieldstone stepping stones, but as I watch, I'm realizing that the methods I'm using can be used for bluestone. You could use them for concrete stepping stones you buy at your local home improvement store. Any type of stepping stone. The stone's going to be different, but the methods are going to be exactly the same. So please feel free to use these methods if you do have a different type of stone. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use concrete or mortar underneath your stones to level them. The reason I like to do that is because the concrete and the mortar give the stone more mass. So when you step on them after it sets, the stone's not going to move when you walk on it. There's nothing more frustrating to me than when you walk on stepping stones and the whole stone pops out of the ground. Now you certainly could install the stepping stones the way I show you here and just use soil underneath. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a little bit quicker to install them with the mortar, and it's also a little bit sturdier of an installation. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that I use a lot of terms like mortar and concrete and cement in this video, and I'm pretty sure I use them incorrectly every time. I'm not a mason by trade. I admire the work of a good mason. Boy, it's amazing what they can do. But I just don't have my terminology down. So if you're a mason and you're watching this video, please feel free to correct me down below of what the difference between cement, concrete, and mortar is. I'm sure we can all learn something here. So why don't we go ahead and I'll show you how to install fieldstone stepping stones or any type of stepping stone in your landscape. Hi, I'm John Holden of Land Designs Unlimited in Newtown, Connecticut. And today I'd like to show you how to install fieldstone stepping stones in your landscape. Now, fieldstone stepping stones are a very nice touch wherever you want to encourage people to move through your landscape, especially if it's an informal landscape. Anywhere I have a narrow garden that perhaps needs to be walked through, or even if you think it may be walked through as a shortcut, I'll put some stepping stones. If there's a hose spigot in a landscape that people are going to be using to access the water, I'll put a few stepping stones to encourage people not to walk in the mulch. And another great use for stepping stones is simply to add interest in the landscape. Anytime there's a larger bed, it's always nice to add some stepping stones to add interest, to kind of keep the eye moving around the landscape. Materials and tools you're going to need include stones. What you're going to want are stepping stones that weigh anywhere from 50 to 80 pounds. They're about 4 inches thick and they have one good flat side. If your stones don't have one good flat side, that's okay, because we are going to be setting them in some concrete to hold them up. You may be able to find these rocks in the woods if you have a rocky area. If not, go to your masonry supply yard and just ask for fieldstone veneer. Veneers are usually stones about 4 inches thick. If you're looking for stones that match the stones that you have in your area already, ask for a native fieldstone veneer. You're going to want some Type 2 Portland cement. Type 2 Portland is a darker color. It's going to blend in with your natural soil a little bit better. You're going to want to get a stick, and you're going to want to cut it to 26.5 inches long, and then mark it at 13.25 inches. You're going to want some marking crayons for marking your stones, a nice pry bar, which is very nice to help you to maneuver the stones once they're in the ground. It's easier to use a pry bar to lift a stone and hold it than to use your hands. You're going to want a trowel for manipulating the concrete once you've set the stone. You're going to want a small 18-inch level. A 4-foot level. A bucket for measuring your materials. This is a tool called a grub hoe or a grading hoe, which is very handy for digging a narrow trench where we're going to put our stepping stones. If you don't have a grading hoe, you could certainly just use a plain old shovel. A pair of knee pads is always helpful to have. And whenever you're working with concrete, you want to use a respirator. It's very nasty stuff that's in concrete, so whenever the concrete is very dusty before it's mixed, it's always good to have one of these on. This is one I found from 3M. It's called a 7502. It's very comfortable to wear for a while, so I highly recommend this one if you don't have a good respirator. And the last thing you want is a little bit of stone dust. Now what we've done is, as we've unloaded the truck, we've placed our stones approximately where we want them to be. Then I came back and I took my red crayon and I just took a look at each stone and I marked right the center of the stone, give or take, with my red crayon. Once I did that, I took my stick and I could measure out from center to center of each stone. If I'm near the edge of a sidewalk or the edge of the bed, I'll use my halfway point and measure from the center of the stone to the edge of whatever either the edge of the walkway here or the edge of the garden there. Now, in this circumstance, we didn't have quite enough room for 3 stones spaced evenly, so in the middle I did have to fudge it a little bit and make them a little bit tight. When you're laying your stones out, you're going to want to take the time to read them. Now what I mean by that is each stone seems to have a call for where it wants to be in the landscape. I like to place larger stones as the first step off of a lawn. It's always better to have something big that's going to be very easy to step onto, and then if you have some trickier smaller stones, work them in farther down the way once people are used to the transition from the smooth lawn to the somewhat choppy stepping stones. Now this big rock I've used here, I've also placed for another reason. If you look at the front, it's got a very deep front to it. This bed, the grade is slowly dropping down. So if we place this rock level, it's going to end up being a little bit high in the front. So your mulch is probably going to be like up to here or so. Now because it's so deep, there's plenty of room there that if we don't cover the whole rock, and some shows, there's plenty of coverage. Now, if we come over here, I want to show you one other stone. This stone isn't a round stone, but it still works very nicely for this position. If you look at the bed here, it's got a very flowing curve. It's like a C shape. The shape of the stone works very well to start that out. It's also a bigger stone. So I placed that one at the edge of the bed as well. It's now time to go ahead and mix our concrete. What I'm going to do is I've got a red line in the bucket here. The ratio is 6 buckets of stone dust to 1 bucket of type 2 Portland. So I'll go ahead and fill the bucket 6 times and then put the Portland on top and then start to mix. Now we're ready for a Portland cement. What I'm going to do is put my respirator on, this gets pretty dusty, and go ahead and dump some into our bucket. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and take my mortar hoe and I'll pull all the stone dust and the Portland cement to one side of the wheelbarrow, and then I'll pull it back to the other. Then I'll go ahead and start adding water where it's lower, pull it all into the water, and then pull it back to the other side, and that's going to be mixed well enough for what we're trying to do. We've added some water to our wheelbarrow, and now we're going to go ahead and start mixing. We'll pull all the stone dust and Portland to one side, adding water as needed, and then we'll go ahead and pull it to the other side, and it's going to be all set. The consistency we're looking for here is pretty much peanut butter. The looser it gets, the easier it is to work with. The more stiff it is, the more difficult it is to work with. The only thing is if you go too loose, your stones are just going to settle right into it. So aim for a creamy peanut butter. A little trick when you're mixing concrete is every time you add some water, use it as a chance to clean off your tools so they go through the concrete a little bit better. Now that should be about right. It might be a touch wet, we'll see. It's going to dry out a little bit before we put it down. You'll notice when I mixed the concrete, I ended up with the concrete at the front of the wheelbarrow when I finished. It's going to make it a heck of a lot easier to move this wheelbarrow around the landscape. What we're going to do today is break this video up into two parts. The first part is going to be big picture and a little bit of detail about how we go about installing the stepping stones. Now if you'd like to watch more detail of me physically installing them, please see the second video about installing fieldstone stepping stones, and I'll actually hold the camera over me as I install some.